Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right there from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, a little bit of our general impressions, and how it holds up today. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. It's another solo episode this week. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our American listeners. I'm recording this on Thanksgiving, and that's kind of why it's a solo show. Didn't want to interrupt anybody else's holiday. But today we are doing our first in the Simpsons line of Disney Plus offerings. Obviously, The Simpsons being originally a Fox property that got acquired by Disney in the recent Fox acquisition, and so I was looking for shows to do for Thanksgiving if there were any specific Disney themed Thanksgiving shows, and I couldn't really find much. But I was like, The Simpsons has been on for 30 years, so of course they have to have Thanksgiving themed episodes, and sure enough, they did. So I pulled here Bart versus Thanksgiving from all the way back in season 2, episode 7. Simpsons was definitely a series that I certainly grew up with. One of the, it's just out of camera view, I think, like all of my seasons of Simpsons up through, I don't know, like season 20 or something like that, are on DVD behind me on this bookshelf. Um, and so it's definitely a series that is near and dear to me. Growing up, I admittedly fallen off like many people have in recent years, but this is certainly an episode going back to that immediately started ringing kind of all those nostalgia bells. And it's probably something I haven't watched in like 10 years since I started getting all of those the box sets of the DVDs. Um, and yeah, it was just nice kind of revisiting early Simpsons. So let's dive into a little bit of the history. This episode specifically, episode season two, episode 7, originally released November 22nd, 1990. That was on Thanksgiving of 1990, a rare Thursday episode of The Simpsons. It was very much probably because The Simpsons obviously has been a Sunday night staple. Pretty much since its inception. And I imagine they were going for the Thanksgiving, crowd, and so they said, "Well, let's take our normal Sunday night show and Fox, it's one of our biggest shows. Let's put it on Thursday night when people are going to be in front of their TV watching stuff." So, um, other notable releases there of 1990, you had The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, debuted September 10th of 1990, and recently had a 30-year anniversary reunion special that I saw on HBO Max. I have not watched it, but I saw that they had that. Law and Order debuted September 13th, the original Law and Order that spawned a million spin-offs. Tiny Toon Adventures originally debuted September 14th. That's getting a reboot here soon, as a kind of a follow up to the excitement around the Animaniacs reboot. Captain Planet and the Planeteers debuted on September 15th. So yeah, this 1990 was clearly just like my childhood when it started kind of hitting full swing, and then Law and Order also. And then also debuting on the same night as this episode of The Simpsons, you had The Undertaker made his debut on Survivor Series for the WWF, and they obviously just did a big 30 years of The Undertaker celebration at Survivor Series, kind of winding down his career, kind of seeming to retire the character. The runtime here is 23 minutes. And then in the Simpsons timeline of things, this episode falls between Dead Putting Society, which is where Bart gets into a mini golf tournament with, I believe, Todd Flanders. Rod or Todd Flanders, one of the Flanders boys. And then afterwards was the iconic Bart the Daredevil episode where Bart tries to skateboard jump over Springfield Gorge to comedic results. The roll call for this episode, who's who? David Silverman is our director for this episode. He directed 33 episodes of The Simpsons between 1989 and all the way up through 2015. He was the co-director, alongside, I believe, Pete Docter of Monsters, Inc., He was the director for the Simpsons movie when that finally came along. And he's also directed a couple of Simpsons shorts. The Longest Daycare, which was the Simpsons short featuring Maggie going to an Ayn Rand like play school kind of thing that originally aired prior to Ice Age Continental Drift, which I guarantee I did not see in theaters. So I was trying to figure out how I would have seen it, and I'm guessing it had to have been from like from a DVD add-on or something like that. It probably no, because that was I think that came out in like 2012, so I think it came out well after the Simpsons movie. But I don't know. I don't know when I would have originally seen that, but yeah, that jumped out at me as like I definitely have seen it. And then Playdate with Destiny is the other Simpsons short that he's directed, which is the Simpsons short that debuted alongside Onward earlier this year, because 2020 has been 10 years long, it seems. The writer for this episode is George Meyer, who prior to this had done a couple seasons on Late Night with David Letterman. He'd done 56 episodes there from 1982 to 1984. From there, he went on to Saturday Night Live for a few seasons, helping write 71 episodes there between 1985 and 1989. And then he would go on to do 12 episodes with The Simpsons, this being his first one here in 1990, all the way through 2001 would be his last episode. And then he was one of the credited writers on The Simpsons movie, one of, I think, 13, I think. They definitely brought in a lot of people for that movie. Starring, of course, it's the Simpsons cast. So you have Dan Castellaneta there as Homer, who has done, at time of recording, 691 episodes, according to IMDb, of The Simpsons. And prior to The Simpsons, he's probably best known for his work on The Tracy Ullman Show. Julie Kavner as Marge has only done 690 episodes. So there's one episode she's not in, and I don't know which one it is. Brenda Morgenstern on Rhoda, the Mary Tyler Moore spinoff, was probably the thing she was best known for prior to playing Marge here. Nancy Cartwright as Bart, another 691 episodes. Prior to this, Nancy Cartwright had played one of the main characters in Snorks, which is by the same guy who did the Smurfs, but did not ever receive nearly the acclaim that the Smurfs did. But it was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon that had 4 seasons or something like that. Yeardley Smith, playing Lisa, of course, is only credited in 689 episodes. So there's 2 episodes that she's not in, and I don't know what 2 those would be. Prior to this, she had done a TV series called Brothers. That was probably the thing she was best known for. And then certainly when I was growing up, alongside early seasons of this, she was doing the TV show Herman's Head in live action in person. And then Harry Shearer is the other kind of supporting cast member. No Hank Azaria in this episode, and I didn't look into it too deep to figure if he just hadn't started doing voices on the show yet. But I got to imagine he was already in there, in somewhere in the repetition or in the repertoire, but not in this episode in particular. Instead, it's just Harry Shearer, who, of course, known for among others in this episode, Mr. Burns and Kent Brockman. He is one who is credited in 691 episodes, so he's kind of outside of the core family. He's always been one of those other voices. And then prior to this, he was probably best known for his time on SNL in the 70s and 80s, as well as, of course, This Is Spinal Tap, playing in that film. The 2 other voices in this episode are, one is Greg Berg playing Rory, who I think is one of the homeless guys in the episode. They're never really credited by name, so I don't know. And I watched a second time looking specifically for Rory, and he's the only voice that doesn't sound like one of the main guys, one of the main cast. This was his only episode ever of The Simpsons. But around this time, he was playing Donatello in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that ran from 1989 to 1991. And then he was also the voice of Fozzie and Scooter in Muppet Babies. So he certainly was, a known quantity. And then Maggie Rodswell is playing in here. She's credited as Mrs. Spencer / nurse. and I don't know who those two characters would have been from the episode just out of the top of my head, but she has done 243 episodes of The Simpsons and counting, and is probably best known on the series as the voice of Helen Lovejoy. Uh, Somebody think about the children. Ah. The trivia for this episode is the Bart's chalkboard message. Of course, the iconic opening gag of the series. I will not do that thing with my tongue, is what he's saying. The sofa gag is the family run in to find Grandpa sleeping on the couch. Their approach wakes him, causing him to flail in surprise. This is other trivia. This is the first occasion where Mr. Burns unleashes the hounds. And when Bart is discovered attempting to steal a pie from the windowsill, one of the guards at Burns' mansion is reading Les Miserables, in which the main character is imprisoned for stealing a loaf of bread after breaking a window. While watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade on TV, Bart doesn't recognize the balloon characters of Bullwinkle and Underdog. Homer chides him, "Don't you know anything?" And Bart replies, "Well, it wouldn't hurt them to use some cartoons made in the last 50 years. Just then, a Bart Simpson balloon appears on the TV screen. The episode aired on Thanksgiving Day, 1990, when a Bart Simpson balloon actually did appear in the parade for the first time, which just goes to kind of like announce to the world the like cultural impact that The Simpsons had. Like in season 2 of the TV show, obviously, yeah, it had been running for a couple years there on the Tracy Ullman show, so it was kind of a known character, but The Simpsons, getting a Bart Simpson's balloon in the Macy's Day Parade in the second season of the show definitely is a testament to the overwhelming popularity that the show had at the time, and the fact that they kind of make fun of that and kind of have their own little meta joke on it. Again, the same day that the balloon would have debuted is a nice little gag. Like I watching it now here 30 years in hindsight, I was like, did they predict that they were going to eventually have a balloon in the Macy's Day Parade? And so looking it up, I was like, no, it was just that was when it debuted, was that quickly. So it seemed like it was primed for another one of those like The Simpsons predict the future kinds of things. But nope, it was just them telling the present. This is the first episode that really targets and treats and centers around the Bart and Lisa sibling rivalry. Marge's mother, Jackie Bouvier, makes her first physical appearance in the episode, though she was first referenced in a flashback in season 1 episode The Simpsons Moaning Lisa. Her name is an obvious reference to the maiden name Jacqueline Bouvier of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, the First Lady of the U.S. from 1961 to 1963. It is ironic that the episode aired on November 22nd, which is the anniversary of the assassination of her husband, U.S. President JFK. This is the second appearance of Kent Brockman, with his first appearance being Krusty Gets Busted. This is also the first appearance, I believe, I didn't pull this one in, but I saw it in IMDb, the first appearance of Eddie, of the cop duo Lou and Eddie, Eddie being, I believe, Eddie's the white cop, Lou's the black cop. First appearance of Lou, then. It's first appearance of the black cop, but it's definitely not his voice. They don't have his voice down yet. So it's just Harry Shearer doing a Kent Brockman-like voice, it sounded like, as he takes the statement over, like, where's the kid? After the centerpiece she made for Thanksgiving dinner is ruined by Bart, Lisa writes a poem beginning, "I saw the best meals of my generation destroyed." This is a reference to the poem Howl by Allen Ginsberg, which begins, "I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, ... Ginsberg was said to be pleasantly amused by this reference, and sure enough, on Lisa's like bookshelf behind her, she's writing that out. You have a book of poems by Edgar Allan Poe. There was one other book reference on there, and then Ginsberg there in the middle. So definitely. Our well-read Lisa, kind of having her little moment to shine. And it's weird. This is definitely one of those. There are a couple things in this episode that like I obviously would not have picked up on at the time, originally watching it 30 years ago now. But that was definitely like hearing that line. I was like, that's definitely a reference to something. I know that. I don't know what it is. I wouldn't have known until looking it up here on trivia that it was, a Ginsberg poem or something like that. But it was clearly a riff on something, which is just something that the Simpsons certainly known in doing, and like I've easily lost count of the cultural land marks and touchstones that I know of first from the Simpsons, and then wouldn't see like the actual source material for years later. Like I think they've even made the joke that like they've probably remade Citizen Kane shots, shot for shot, throughout references in The Simpsons, and like obviously Rosebud and the snow globe dropping being like one of the most iconic. And I've never seen Citizen Kane, but I know so much of the iconography of Citizen Kane because of that. Similar, like I've never seen Shining, but I know, I knew Here's Johnny from Here's Homer or whatever before ever seeing or recognizing that from The Shining. So how does this episode hold up here 30 years later? Like surprisingly well. I think it's the fact that it doesn't really, and The Simpsons for the most part, especially in this day and age, didn't really rely on like making super on the nose topical references or anything like that. Like the only thing that really jumps out is like Bart, being a staple of the Thanksgiving Day parade. Um, but yeah, I thought just kind of revisiting this, it was amazing how many things just immediately started flooding back, and how many jokes that I think of that like just stuck with me. The Release the Hounds one obviously is one of the iconic Simpsons quotes, but also Homer calling. Picking up the phone and saying, "Operator, give me the number for 911," is like a classic. Seems like a classic joke now, and maybe it was even a classic joke at the time, but certainly it seems like it was maybe the first time I would have heard a joke like that. Um, I love the runner here of Marge's mom just being like mean and cruel throughout, but always like blaming her like laryngitis or raspy voice or whatever, so she can't say much, or it'll ruin her voice, and so everything she says is just like the most pointed dig she can stick in there at Marge. Um, is just like a weird level of like passive aggressive cruelty that I've grown to more appreciate in my older age. And there's even a joke kind of, and I didn't catch it until even the second time watching this episode here. Um, when Marge's mom arrives, she gets out of a cab or something at the front door. She walks around to the back, which is where the kitchen is, and like taps on the window, and then comes in the back door of the house. Like she doesn't enter through the front door, and maybe that was she didn't want to push the doorbell, or she couldn't because she wouldn't be able to like yell. And she knew Marge would be in the kitchen. I don't know, but I also love on the whole like Marge being the put upon one of both her family in The Simpsons, but also among the Bouviers. You also have the great gag of and the terrible guest mannerisms of Selma and Patty showing up with food to Thanksgiving dinner. Just like fun little things like that. And then the biggest joke that stood out to me is something I definitely wouldn't have gotten at the time, but have like think is maybe stealthily one of the best jokes in this episode is throughout obviously like Homer was watching the big football game in the background kind of thing, and during the halftime show of that, and like none of it is really shown, like a little bit I guess is shown, but like the the announcer kind of talks about when the halftime show is done. They talk about like the stadium being a glow with flash bulbs, and that's like iconic imagery of football games and Super Bowls and everything. Kind of growing up is like the big moments happen and flash bulbs are across the stadium because everybody brought their cameras in a pre cell phone kind of world. And the announcer says like it doesn't matter that like the stadium is way too big for flashbulbs to work. These people don't care, and they're just going like they're going crazy, and like that's something that I just never consciously think of. But yeah, it makes no sense that everybody had their flashes on and we're trying to take these big flashy pictures because none of that would like flash is only good for like 6 feet. So yeah, it was just that was a funny little gag that I obviously would not have appreciated when I was 5 years old, or 5 years old when this episode originally aired, let alone, again when I watched it, 10 years ago or something like that. Probably my favorite joke of the episode, just because it like hit me in a new way. And then lastly, just as a kind of indication of like a different time of TV, I love that like the last 10 seconds of the episode are just mouth noises of the family eating. And by I love, I mean I kind of hate it, especially watching it like with headphones on or something, because I'm not a huge fan of like that version of ASMR, but also shout out to them for predicting ASMR, I guess too. But yeah, the like that's definitely one of the first things would get cut for time in this day and age. As commercials have just kind of continued to eat away at sitcom time there. But I appreciate that. Yep, they when they get the whole family back together, they just all sit down. They're eating big old sub sandwiches. Like they have a big old tray, like almost like a 6 foot thing from Subway, just cut down to pieces or whatever. So shout out to Marge, I guess, for making all those extra leftovers into sub sandwich form. But yeah, overall, like it's a fun episode. The Bart and Lisa like rivalry is a great dynamic of the show that they obviously would continue to come back to throughout the course of the show. But the fact here, it's Bart is just a cruel kid at the beginning. And like rather than face up or apologize or own up to that, he leaves and goes and ends up pretending to be homeless before eventually coming back and having just a nice little heartfelt moment with Lisa on the roof of the house, as Homer kind of like watches on from the master bathroom or whatever, sort of. Obviously, like he couldn't see anything, despite the image trying to imply that like looking up through a window means you can see above and behind you. But yeah, it was just a fun little like relationship dynamic of the show, and I thought they did a great job with it. So it's definitely still, I think, rings true all these years later, as a testament to the writing and the quality of the show and why it became the cultural phenomenon it was and still in some ways continues to be. So overall, I give this an A. It is a solid episode of The Simpsons. I look forward to eventually, kind of in future episodes of that D Plus show, visiting through many others of the years over the years. But yeah, solid A from me here. A little bit of extra credit, other suggestions on Disney Plus if you like this. Unsurprisingly, the other suggestions are basically anything else The Simpsons related. So you have the Simpsons movie, you have the Simpsons shorts I mentioned earlier, Playdate with Destiny and The Longest Daycare, and then you get out of the Simpsons realm and you get into the DuckTales reboot, which I certainly also stand by. You have Big City Greens, which I don't know anything about. You have Gravity Falls, which we've done an episode on and I really enjoyed. You have Star versus the Forces of Evil, which I don't know anything about. And you have Big Hero 6, the series, which I love Big Hero 6, the movie, but I've not actually watched anything on the series yet, the animated series. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, audience, for joining me, and happy Thanksgiving to you if you celebrated it. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and you can follow all of the latest from That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site on Twitter or thatnerdysite.com. Just as a kind of peek behind the curtain at the upcoming slate, obviously we're here now in the holiday rush, so it seems like a good enough time to do kind of a bevy of Christmas-themed movies on Disney Plus. So the next 4 weeks, I don't know the order necessarily, but the slate of movies we have kind of for the next 4 weeks between now and Christmas is tentatively going to be Home Alone, The Santa Claus, Nightmare Before Christmas, and probably my favorite Christmas movie that's not Die Hard is The Muppet Christmas Carol. When I was looking through the Christmas collection of like, let's pick and choose what I want to sit down and look at for this this month. I saw that on there. I was like, oh, well, that's definitely going to be a pick. So stay tuned for episodes on all of those films in the coming week, in the coming month, basically. If you liked what you heard, as always, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining me. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.